Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is an award winning game designer and author. With games such as Deus Ex and Dishonored, and books like Soon I Will Be Invincible and You, his new book, Fight Me, comes out May 23rd. Please welcome Austin Grossman to Epic Realms. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
I appreciate being here. I love Soon I Will Be Invincible. It's on my shelf. It was what introduced me to you as an author. And then later on, I find out you do game designs, and I was like, that is so cool that you kind of have bridged that gap between the two worlds. Was that something that you started off at an early age with, dealing with both of those, or was it one over the other?
The whole thing is a series of accidents.
Yeah,
I have to say, I grew up with video games, although I was born in 1969, so video games, but not as you know them. Uh,
yeah.
I
So like
grew
Apple
up,
IIe era
yeah, Apple IIe or
before
even
that.
before. Well, because where I grew up, there were a lot of defense contractors. It was a very high tech area,
Okay.
so kids, parents would have terminals going into like mainframes, and we would play Zork. We'd play early text adventures on the terminals. That's what got me into it. I must have been like 6 or 7,
Oh wow.
and then personal computers, and uh, then the rest of it. I feel like I've like lived the whole history of the medium. Um, and then when I got out of college, I like didn't know what to do. I was like, I'm gonna work in publishing. I'm gonna be like a sad literary person.
Yeah.
But then I very, very randomly, and I have one visual aid here, which I'm gonna put on the screen.
Okay.
I answered an ad. Wait, where's oh, there we go.
Oh,
Answered
it's an
an
actual
ad.
cutout ad. It's an actual little
I
cutout
cut this
ad,
ad out of the
faded and
Boston
everything. Yeah.
Globe. Yeah, it is a faded piece of parchment. I cut it out of the Boston Globe, and I wrote in, and they're asking for a fiction writer, and I thought this might be me. Uh,
Okay.
but then the people who placed that ad had just shipped Ultima Underworld, one of the very first real-time
Yeah.
3D
Yeah.
PC games, right? It was them and id Software back then. So, I mean, imagine how lucky I was, like stepping into that moment with a
Right.
bunch of really cool MIT grads, and we had the tech, but we didn't have there were no first person shooters yet. We were just inventing how to play in 3D, how to
Right.
tell stories in 3D. It was just this fantastic, lucky moment where I stepped into a place where like the medium was just starting to get
Yeah.
exciting.
Let's rewind a little bit. You grew
Yeah.
up. A lot of your family members, as I understand, are also kind of into writing and writing different forms. Right. Your brother's an author. Other family members, yes, no.
Yeah, my brother wrote the Magicians books and some other things. He has something new coming out this summer. Uh, The Bright Sword, which is great.
Okay.
My father was a poet. He won a MacArthur Genius Award for it. My mother's a novelist. My sister was a math prodigy, and no one knows where she came from. Uh, and she had a very different path, and she's a sculptor now.
Okay.
And she is also fantastic. So we were busy, very, very intense household.
Yeah.
A bunch of weirdos, although when you're a kid, you don't know you're weirdos. It's just your family.
Right.
Uh,
So when you went to
I,
college, what was kind of your focus in college? And also, I guess let's even before that. When you were in school, did video games or writing and all that kind of stuff, did that hinder your schooling at all? Were you like, I'd rather do this than play, than do math?
I was not one of those kids who ever always wanted to do something. I didn't always want to be a writer. Like I liked some video games, but I didn't ever think about making them.
Yeah.
Uh, I was a normal kid trying to do good at school and get into a decent college,
Okay.
and that was it. And then there were kind of two like lightning bolt moments for me. One was when I graduated college and started in video games, and suddenly like bam, you had this excitement.
Yeah.
And then when I was like 31, 32, I started writing Soon I'll Be Invincible. And that was the other moment where I thought, holy crap, this is a thing I want to do.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, no, none of it, there was no early plan. There was
What did
no
you
like,
What did you
oh,
go to college for?
I went to college for psychology. Uh, I had this distorted idea that I was going to be a psychiatrist, which really would have been the worst possible thing for me to do. Uh, so glad I shook off that notion.
Okay.
And and fell into all the stuff I fell into.
Okay. Okay. So you get out of college, right? And you get this
Mhm.
job, you answer the ad. Was that what your family expecting you to get out of college and be like go work in video games? Or did they
You
just like,
know,
"Hey, whatever makes you happy?"
it was whatever makes you happy. There's thank God he got a job in something. Uh and Yeah, so they were fine with it. But I mean, video games weren't what they are now. They were like more of a niche hobby thing.
Mhm.
Uh, and nobody, quite thought of it as a career. Uh, and then yeah, and then we shipped we worked, and that was 92. That was 92. We shipped on Ultima Underworld 2, and then we shipped System Shock. System Shock was really the thing that changed things for me, right?
Okay.
It's the ancestor of BioShock
Yeah.
and a lot of other games.
What was kind of your role there early on, and how did the role at that company evolve? And that was, I believe, Looking Glass, right? Was that Looking Glass?
That was Looking Glass.
Okay.
Yes. Uh, yes, I mean, I was hired as a writer, which also meant learning scripting languages. And I had taken some computer classes in college. Uh, so yeah, and I was writer, and then I became lead designer for System Shock. Uh, but yeah, so I mean, I was a writer, but you evolve into a designer, right?
Yeah.
Designers tend to be sort of multi-class people in any case. So that's what happened. And then System Shock, um, I got into narrative design, right? Was System Shock is probably the most consequential thing I will ever do in my life, because that was where I first thought of doing audio logs
Okay.
as a storytelling mechanism. Uh, that's probably the thing that I will leave behind on this earth, is that there are zillions of games with audio logs.
That's awesome. What what do you think you learned in your time there? The what was it, like 4 years? Was there something that you came in without that skill, and during your time there, now it's something that you will always use and always love to have that knowledge?
That's an interesting question, because yeah, my apprenticeship in writing was in video games, and I came to fiction long after. And I learned a bunch of things there. I learned The first thing you learn is brevity. The first thing you learn in video games is brevity. Don't assume that you're the show. People are going to click through your cutscenes, right? To get to the game, which is, you see other people do it, and then you find yourself doing it, and then you realize, wow, you know what? I'm not here to hear myself talk. I'm here to like add sort of flavor and depth to a game.
Yeah.
But there's that sense where you need to be very brief and very condensed, and you have to sort of earn every word, right? Because you don't want to waste anybody's time.
Right.
So that I learned that. I learned, like, don't don't take for granted your place your place on the page, right? You want grab people every word, every sentence, if you possibly can. And then I learned, lots of weird ways to tell stories, right?
Yeah.
I'm fatally unable to tell stories from beginning to end now, right? I always have to start in the middle, and then, then, start working my way backward to the beginning of events.
Yeah.
It's completely screwed up my narrative sense. That's
Do you find yourself, you get this job, right? And it's kind of like you said, it's kind of newer in the world. It's not a super well known career. People don't even know that that's a career, right? They're just like, a game came out. Oh, somebody made that. That's a job. Okay. Do you have to go there those those first couple of years and like explain to your friends, explain to your family, be like, yeah, this is what I do, and they're like, you what? Wait, do you have to explain that? Was that an easy thing to explain to them?
Well, everyone knew what a video game was, but yeah, no one ever thought about making them, or who makes them, or or any of that. Most people were a little jealous of me, I have to say.
Yeah.
Everybody came out of college to their normal career, and I was the weird one, and people could tell there was a little buzz. There was something a little exciting um, about being in that industry at that time. So I have to say, I kind of looked kind of cool
Yeah.
uh, when when that happened. And then it was then, it was the 90s, and everything started revving up,
Right.
right?
Right.
CD-ROMs came in, internet came in, 3D accelerators came in, like
The consoles, all the consoles and console wars.
yeah, console wars, everything started evolving toward more photoreal graphics.
Hmm.
The whole thing kind of suddenly went from being, yeah, this sort of, a geeky sideshow to like a real medium
Yeah.
that was mainstream in the culture.
Going off of that, do you think right now, looking at it, comparing video games now to things like movies and television, would you say it's kind of on par as far as production, putting the storytelling, or maybe even have surpassed it?
Well, it's hard to generalize. Like the best the best video game storytelling is as good as the best storytelling in every medium. If you take the average, it's probably still a bit lowest common denominator comparatively.
Okay.
But we have incredible writers in the medium now. We didn't used to.
Yeah.
Uh, so so yeah, like I was said, the top level stands comparison with anything,
Yeah.
is what I would say.
So after your time at Looking Glass, you kind of jumped around, did a few different games for a few different companies. Were they coming to you? Did you go to them? How did that transition work, and how did you kind of get your foot in multiple different doors on multiple different games within the next couple of
That
years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did. It does, if you look, it does look like I was kind of a bum at that point. I was actually going to graduate school
Okay.
to try to get my PhD in English. But the great thing about working at Looking Glass was that it went out of business in '98. So it turned out to be this incubator, and people left and went all over the industry, right? Uh, they went for Ironstorm, so I worked on Deus Ex. They went to Arcane, so I worked on the Dishonored games. It was I was mainly working for people I had uh, met at Looking Glass, or people turns out to be people I would know my whole life,
Yeah.
which was pretty great.
Yeah. And you can kind of see some of the Looking Glass seeds that were developed that went out to some of those other games like a Dishonored or like a Deus Ex. You can kind of see the roots back at Looking Glass. What do you think was one of the main things that Looking Glass did for video games today, and some of the work that you did there, that you see all over the place today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the two big things we brought, one was, what we now call environmental storytelling, right? Storytelling that happens as you're moving through a space, and you look around the space to understand what happened. You see the blood trail where somebody was dragged off somewhere. You find the diary. The whole idea of that kind of storytelling was to be able to tell a story in depth, but not get in the way of the gameplay, not take people out into a menu conversation. Let the 3D world always be running. Let players always be deciding where they want to look and what they want to do. So is that, and then the other thing is emergent gameplay, right? Which is a thing that people studied, and sort of everyone was kind of discovering it in the '90s. But we were the genre that people call immersive sims, right? Which are first person 3D games with heavy simulation elements that let you play more creatively than you might in a sort of Call of Duty, right? It gives you stealth options, right?
Yeah.
You can win through stealth. You can win through uh, role playing. You can win through fighting. You can win through like weird hacks of the physics system.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of game I still gravitate to, right? The thing that invites you to be creative about how you play.
Yeah. Do you still play video games regularly?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I play a lot of indie games. I don't have time to play like a AAA,
Yeah.
40-hour experience, but I'll always get the latest indie games because people are always trying something new. That's the other thing. Medium is always moving forward. People are always experimenting.
Does it ever feel
Uh,
like work, sitting down and be like, oh, a game, oh, I gotta, do this? Or is it like still separate for you?
Once in a while, like there's something I have to do for work. Like I gotta learn how to do game economies better. So I play some game and I gotta go through, you know, take apart, what they're doing with currencies, and
Yeah.
and schedules of dispensing resource, and that is work. And then I'm like, I've got my pen out, I'm copying down the numbers. Yeah. So sometimes it's work because I still do it as my day job.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're working some of these other companies after you left and you're doing them, were you kind of balancing multiple projects at once, or was it like you have one project, you do that, you focus on that, you don't work on anything else. Once that's done, you move on. Was there just like a little crossover, or was it kind of like 2 hours here, 3 hours there, 1 hour there, bouncing around?
Well, it was generally one at a time, but mostly because I was contracting as a writer, and there still weren't that many projects that had, you know, uh, all that much work
Okay.
for a dialogue writer. So working on something like Dishonored, you know, I could really delve into it and do story development and do all those branching conversations. But there weren't that many opportunities for doing the kind of writing I like to do. So yeah, generally one at a time.
Okay. Eventually, you decided you're like, I'm going to write a novel. How did that shift take place? Was that just like a, I'm going to do it now for fun, or you had this idea and you just couldn't get it out of your head? What was kind of the shift there from video games and writing these video games to I'm going to write a novel?
Yeah, that was a moment. I had kind of quit games because I had reached a point in my life, and I was maybe 28, 29, where I had lost the ability to have a conversation about any other topic. And I was like, no, I'm in too small a world. I have to break out. So I applied to PhD programs in English literature. I got into Berkeley. I went to Berkeley, and I had always, wanted to be a fiction writer, and I had always kind of kept scribbling, although I'd more or less given it up on that. But then I was at Berkeley, and I was writing a lot of papers, and I was reading a lot of books, and and then there was this other voice that was sort of nagging at me. To jump tracks for a second,
Yeah.
I grew up on Watchmen. I grew up on Dark Knight Returns. Grew up on the idea of like writing comic books, and that superheroes were like there was something really deep and resonant and interesting about superheroes,
Yeah.
and the idea of placing them in something that felt like both the real world and like a realer psychology, like making them feel like realer people. And I love to watch it. I've read Watchmen 8,000 times.
Right.
Uh, and I did had to come to terms with that Alan Moore was not going to write a sequel to it. And I thought, I like to think about what if superheroes were real, but then I really like to think about what if supervillains were real. Uh,
Right.
and it was kind of a perfect storm because when you're a graduate student, you think, oh, I'm so smart, but I'm paid nothing and no one respects me. And then, you get kind of angry. And then I
Mhm.
had this little voice that was so angry about it that I started to write and write. And I wrote a couple of stories in the voice of Dr. Impossible.
Okay.
Uh, from Soon I Will Be Invincible. And then, my brother had already published two novels. He'd published Warp and Codex. And I kind of sent him what I'd written.
Yeah.
And I said, what am I doing? What is this?
Yeah.
You know, and he actually, without asking, sent it to his agent, which is probably the nicest thing he's ever done for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, the agent called me up and said, this is fucking great. Finish it. Uh, and so, yeah, so I did 6 years,
So
you
again, just
know,
like a circumstantial situation, just like earlier.
yeah, it was, I mean, I don't want to be sort of like mythic about it, but it was one of those moments when like my whole brain kind of lit up like a switchboard. And I thought, okay, everything else I've been doing, I've been kind of faking. This is something that actually takes like all of me and everything I can do, and I can put it into something. It was a real moment for me.
Yeah.
And that was where Soon I'll Be Invincible came from. And until the day it came out, I didn't believe it was real, that it would actually be a real book. And then it was.
Yeah. And it became really popular too, pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah,
At least from my point of view.
yeah, no, Doctor Impossible came along and saved my ass. I don't know where I would be. Uh, that was discovering I could do that was yeah, that was a life-changing moment. And I've been a novelist ever since, on top of anything else I'm
Yeah.
doing.
When you're doing the process of writing that, because it's your first book, right? It's your first time
Mhm.
writing a full-fledged novel, writing it out. What were some of the struggles you ran across doing that? And do you have to find your own editor? Did they supply an editor? Did you not have an editor? Did you have your brother do stuff? What was some of the struggles you had, some of the things you had to do to get there?
Yeah, well, it was indeed a struggle. I mean, part of the struggle was, aside from the writing is hard, it didn't look like anything else. This was like before people had written books about superheroes. It's kind of a subgenre now,
Yeah.
but at the time it didn't exist. You could count them on one hand. So the idea of how to describe superheroes in prose when there are no pictures to look at,
Right.
that was the thing it felt like I was inventing from whole cloth. I was taking classes with some literary writers, but like what I wrote didn't look anything like what they wrote. It was like we were doing something completely different. There was nothing to compare it to. Uh, it was it felt like I was inventing something out of whole cloth without a great model even to work from. So writing a novel is hard, but those were the things that made it extra hard. And then yeah, generally if you're a first time novelist, like you don't get a book deal until you can have a completed manuscript.
Yeah.
So so it was sort of 6 years of suspense to see if I had been wasting my time.
Right.
My brother did help. He was a good editor. I don't like to send him my work, but when I run out of all other options, I will send him a manuscript to look at.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's what family's there for, right?
Yes.
So you get this book, it comes out, it does fairly well. Like, what are you feeling the moment like it's on the shelves? Did you go into Barnes and Noble and look on the shelf, or whatever the book companies were, and look to see if it's on the shelf and see if it's sold out? Did you do any of that kind of stuff?
Oh God, yes. Yes. I remember seeing it for the first time on a on a table in Barnes and Noble. I remember this woman sort of picking it up and looking at it and leafing through it. And then she made a face. She like made this face, like, the hell was that? And she put it back on the table. But that's, you know what? Those are the moments you have. But the reviews were good. People were super nice about it. It was a dream come true, I have to say. Uh, and and yeah, good Lord, standing up in front of people, reading aloud from my work. It was great. I have nothing bad to say about it.
Yeah, no,
It
it's
was
amazing. And me being, like I said earlier at the very beginning, like that book, I had a bunch of people separately, you got to read this book, you got to read this book, you got to read this book. And a lot of my audience knows, I'm an audiobook listener. I sometimes don't have the attention span or the time to sit down and read. That's been my way for a very, very long time. It's very hard. I enjoy reading when I get the time and when I can. And that one, I opened it up and I got through the first paragraph and I lost entire days until that book was done. And I've still gone back and read it multiple times because the storytelling, like you said, it hadn't been done before. And even now, when you look back, some of those other stories that are out there, they still don't tell the stories the way you did. There is something different and something unique, and that's something you're going to always have, because I don't think anybody can replicate what you did in that book.
what a wonderful thing to say.
It's
Uh,
amazingly true. In the audience that's listening, they need to go and get Soon I Will Be Invincible and start their journey, because it's amazing. And what made you decide, I'm going to see this from the point of view of a bad guy? Because again, it hadn't been done a lot, right?
yeah, that was literally that was the voice in my head, and
Okay.
and you know what? I was depressed. I was angry. I was like, I had, what? I had nothing. Felt, in a way, like I felt I had no place to go. I had no money. I had nothing to do but like write my way out of it, right? And when you're a supervillain, you always lose, but you always want to conquer the world, and you always are going to come back and do it. And that was the feeling. Uh, it was pure channeling, something inside yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've also done the book You, Crooked. You want to tell us a little bit about those two books as well? Give us an idea of what people can expect if they decide they want to get the whole catalog of yours in novel form. Can you tell us a little bit about those books?
Yeah, you is my second book, and it's kind of like my mutant offspring. It's not like the other ones. I wanted to write a kind of mystery or a ghost story set inside a game development studio, because people at the time and still don't really have a realistic idea of what that culture is like.
Right.
And it's one of those weird like microcultures that is fascinating to get inside of. And I wanted to use the language of gaming, like the book sort of veers into like you know things that read like D&D modules. I wanted to play around with all the crazy cultural material of the game world. uh so I wrote that, and then I wrote Crooked. And Crooked is another villain book, right? but it's a different kind of villain book. I was born in 69, as I keep saying, which meant that the first US president I remember was Richard Nixon. And there was that moment as a child when you realize that the president is a villain. And like, because Nixon was like not only a villain, but kind of a laughingstock. And it was just, I never understood that when I was 6 years old. I was like, isn't the president like the best person we're supposed to get? And like, why did we get this guy?
Yeah.
And then I never lost that sense of like that mystery of who is that guy? And uh and then and even the real Nixon is kind of unknowable. Even the people close to him didn't really know who he was. So I wanted to write his story, but then because I can't do anything a normal way, I thought, what if what explains everything is that he is mixed up in an H.P. Lovecraft story at the same time?
Okay.
And that then H.P. Lovecraft, all this H.P. Lovecraft like black magic conspiracy is explaining all the stuff we know on the surface in the historical records actually explained by the fact that the world is being menaced by horrific cosmic monsters that are being, utilized in the Cold War. And Nixon is just doing everything he can to kind of hold it together and conceal this. And that's and so it's his whole story as explained by that weird truth. And there's a whole bunch of fun world building around it where like, all US presidents are sorcerers, and with unique powers, and the entire political world is a weird magical conspiracy.
Yeah.
And you know what? I love that book too. I think it's great. And I wish the TV show had been made. We had a great pilot script.
Oh, that's awesome. That would have been cool. Did other people, did you go through the same publishers, or did you have to like shop around for the other consecutive books, or were they like, this one did so good, we'll do your other ones? How did that work out?
It's funny. Soon I'll Be Invincible with Pantheon, but you know what? They didn't want to know about the new ones. I'm not actually sure what the problem was there.
Okay.
So the second and third were with Little Brown Company, for a 2-book deal, and then the new one is. But that was one where the editor bought it and then left the company. So that's what you're always afraid of as an author, right? Is the editor, the one who champions the book, is then you get orphaned. And then now the new one is at Penguin Random House.
Okay.
UK, the same editor who did Soon I'll Be Invincible there.
Okay. That's great. So he moved from one to the other
eventually?
Yes. That's
yes,
great.
He remembered and he snapped it up. Yeah.
Okay. I love Penguin Random House. They're I have a couple people over there that always send me authors, so shout out to them over at Random House. We love them over there. So, and then are you doing games in between these books, or are you like do books and then back to games? How are you jumping around? How is that happening?
Yeah, well, it's all chaos back here. When just as Crooked was being finished up, I went to work at this is a whole other weird story.
Okay.
I went to work at a company called Magic Leap.
Okay.
Right, who had it back in 2013, like patented these like mixed reality goggles, right? The same thing as the Apple Vision Pro is now. This was in 2013. Of course, it was a very wonky prototype. I went to work for them because I thought to myself, this is just like 92. It's a whole new, brand new technology.
Yeah.
We're going to do brand new, interesting things with it. And it was fascinating. And it was a bizarre ride because that company, I arrived, it was worth $50 million. By 2016, it was worth a little over $6 billion, billion with a B.
Yeah.
And it was this bizarre startup story right where it blows up. It's just like a Silicon Valley myth, except it was in Florida. Of course, guess how much it's worth now.
I'm not going to guess.
I still have a day job. Anyway, but it was a fascinating ride. Anyway, so I learned how to design for VR and augmented reality. And now I'm working at a VR startup that I just got funded, and I cannot tell you much about it.
Yeah, I
completely
understand.
This time next year, everyone will know.
Okay, awesome. So, can you tell me if there is a link between both the genres of novels and book telling and video games. Is there a link between how you tell a story between those? Besides the fact that you're just telling a story?
You know, I actually think it's good that there isn't much. I like to, it's because I would burn out on one or the other if they were too similar, is what I think.
Okay.
I mean, video games are they're intensely collaborative. Uh, you're, you're trying to mesh your work with what the technology is doing, what the art director's doing, what the gameplay is doing, what the player is doing, right? You're, you're fitting yourself into uh, a whole larger enterprise. Both collaborate, you're collaborative with the people you're making the game with, and also you're collaborative with the player. You're kind of giving the player tools to have a story happen for them, right? And ideally, you're giving them a lot of agency. You're not making the decisions for them. So in a way, you're kind of creating a space and a context for a story to happen. Uh, right? So it's almost like we're reverse storytelling, right?
Yeah.
Or it's almost like this kind of like distance form of improv. Uh, so that's uh, so that's one discipline, and then the other discipline is the novel, which is just the entire show is language, and you just get into a state where you can get yourself quiet enough where you can hear the words. They're quite different disciplines. They share something that anybody in any art form has to do, which is a sense of kind of informed introspection, right? Basically, you inner check with yourself: is this working, right? And that's a skill that you develop in any art form. But I've been asked the question 100 times, and really there isn't that much link. You have to uh, all art forms the same in that you have to have a certain amount of self knowledge and a certain amount of uh, honesty to check that your work is working. But in terms of storytelling construction, they are quite different.
Quite different. Yeah. There are a
I
lot of
mean,
books. Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I'm actually kind of curious what games do you play? I mean,
Uh,
and
Personally, I play a little bit of everything, but I am also kind of picky. So I do
Mhm.
like, say, the Batman Arkham games. I love the Dishonored games. Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't even know you had worked on them, and then I was like, wait, he worked on these games that I thought were really awesome. So yeah, I like those games. There's a couple new games came out recently. I really enjoyed. Red Dead Redemption. Those stories are always amazing. All the Red Deads, even the original one that was Red Dead Revolver, which wasn't even connected. I loved all those. So
the Red Dead games are so amazing. I don't even understand how they were made. Like,
right.
I've been making games for decades, but I don't even understand how human beings could have assembled the Red Dead games. They're that big and they're that cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But that's true of a lot of how Rockstar works. I really have no idea how they do it. Um, the Dishonored games were really funny because when I got to first, got behind the curtain to talk to Harvey and Raph about making Dishonored, it seemed kind of much too weird to be anything, right? It's this
Right.
not quite steampunk world, and there are these whales, and there's these weird forms of magic, and there's Corvo who's super angry, and everything is super dark and tragic. And I thought to myself, I'm going to work on this, cool idea, guys, but this is never going to go anyplace. I was as surprised as anybody that it did so well and it came out so well. But you know what? I underrated the people at Arcane. They're amazing.
Yeah.
RIP. They just closed the Austin office.
There's it kind of reminds me of the actor Sean Connery. He's like, yeah, I didn't sign up for this movie The Matrix because it didn't make sense. I didn't sign up for the Lord of the Rings because it didn't really make sense. I didn't sign up for there was
No.
another one too
Yeah.
that he did because it didn't make sense. And now he look back and he's like, gosh, I kind of wish I would have done those. And you that sounds kind of like me. I didn't really get it, but I want to work on it because it's really cool. And of course, here it was. When you finally see the final outcome and you see what it is, it's a really cool game.
And you know what? It's a good lesson because anything you're working on could actually be your biggest thing ever. And
Yeah.
you don't know.
A lot of people right now have been doing a lot of thematic video game thematic things, whether it's a thematic cookbook for Halo or writing a novel based on a game, such as Guild Wars 2, writing a novel for that. What would you see as a challenge taking, if a game you worked on, as a creator, and then they go, hey, you also do novels, would you do the novel for the game? Would that be a challenge for you? Or would you be like, that would be a cool crossover?
It's funny that no one ever asked me to do that. I mean, there are Dishonored novels, are they? They never brought that one up. Uh, yeah, I mean, because I mean, I don't think it would be that hard because I play Dishonored, and I'm playing the game and I'm narrating it to myself, and it would just be my definitive playthrough of Dishonored, right? I'm always building out the story as I go. Uh, I think it would be fun actually to write like a Dishonored novel because it would be sort of my definitive playthrough, and I get so invested in my own choices in the game. It'd be
Yeah.
fun. Why didn't they ask me to do that? Okay.
And the reason I
I'll
asked that is
be
because you mentioned that the storytelling is a little bit
yeah,
different. So would you be able to like
yeah.
bridge that gap in that way because you can see them both?
Yeah, it's funny, but it's designed the storytelling is backwards, but it's designed so that when the player gets their hands on it, it is their story that they are telling.
Mm-hmm.
So it is weirdly we set it up backwards so that players can experience it forwards in a sense, right? So that they can own their story. So it would be the flip side of doing that, but I don't think it would be hard. It would be kind of like doing the thing I set it up to do in the first place. Uh, I never thought about that, but yes, and then and the same with a movie. Although it's weird how poorly video game adaptations have done in other media. Now that
Right.
you bring it up,
Right.
right? Until we got to Last of Us, right? What were the really good? Were there any really good video game adaptations?
Some might say Resident Evil, but that's probably about the only
Oh,
one that really did really well. But not that it was
oh
really
yeah,
an adaptation, right? It was
yeah,
thematically similar, but it wasn't like they pulled a story right out of the game like The Last of Us.
yeah. I mean, yes. Why? Yeah. Why don't video game adaptations do better? I think there are several reasons. One is that a character like Mario, was never designed to have an interior life.
Right.
Uh, like if you know how Mario came about, the plumber.
I've heard, but I don't really remember.
Right. Nintendo had licensed Popeye, the cartoon character, for an arcade game, and at the last minute, the deal fell apart, and they were like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? We don't have a character. Like so, Mario was like the replacement for Popeye the Sailor
Okay, I
that they
didn't know that. I didn't know
that
that.
they that they did in a few minutes. They had no idea who he was. Like the nose came out funny, which made it seem like he had a mustache, and that's how they were like, well, who has mustache? Italian people, right? Don't they? And that's why he's Italian. Uh, it was all like a random improvisation. No one ever thought about him having a backstory or anything like that. So you know what? He was not really built to be the the protagonist of the cinematic medium that prizes emotion and psychology the way it does. So that's probably one reason why we don't have good video game movies. And the other reason is that people in Hollywood still don't respect the medium.
Yeah,
They
that's
like
true.
they are happy to phone it in and take a check, but I don't think they try very hard when they're doing their video game licensed films.
Yeah, I
That was a
think
mean
I'm
thing to say
gonna
about Hollywood,
agree.
but it may be true.
Well, hopefully that changes as
Mm.
time comes.
Yeah, I mean every medium or at least every new medium that has come along has just waited a while to get its respect, right? Comic books, graphic novels, uh, right, eventually became their own art form and learned to sort of own their weird own form of storytelling. And it's the same with video games. We're watching it happen right now.
Yeah, for sure. So your new novel, switching gears, your new novel is
Mhm.
Fight Me. It comes out later this week, right?
Yes, comes out on Thursday.
Tell us about this book. What kind of a book should
Um,
we in the audience expect from this?
right, right, okay. I'm gonna turn off the image thing so I can actually show what the book looks like. Yeah, Fight Me is a novel about superheroes. And it's the first one I have done since Soon I Will Be Invincible. Uh, hang on, I am going to turn off my If I can figure out how to do that. Um, how do I turn off my background? Oh my
Oh,
god,
I
it's
don't know.
embarrassing.
We can
Oh, there
also
we go.
put it in
Haha.
the. We can also
Yeah.
put a link in the.
No,
There
you
we go.
should. You should put
There
a
we
link
go.
in, but yeah, that's Fight Me.
There it is. It's a big. It's a
It's a
black book with like a yellow lining on it.
yeah,
It says "Fight Me" on it. It's a gorgeous book. Great background too.
it
Looks
yeah, it's a
very,
beautiful
very
edition.
comic booky on the inside cover.
Yeah, that's art by Brian Hitch, a legendary comic book artist. Uh, anyway, yes, Fight Me. It's about a bunch of people who used to be teenage superheroes, and when they were teenagers, they had all these cool adventures, and then after high school, they drifted apart. Uh, because one of them was a cyborg, one of them was a magic princess. They didn't have that much in common with each other. Uh, and then, but they had all in their teens been through some shit together, right? They
Right.
had weird adventures, and it bent each of their lives in a different way. And then 25 years later, they all have to come back and fight the same enemy again.
Okay.
Uh, and then, and they have to deal with each other, right? They have to deal with all of their like baggage and buried regrets and all of that stuff. It really is the plot of Stephen King's It, which I have no problem with the idea that I stole that plot because I think it's brilliant. I think it's a brilliant way to show how people's lives go and have some cool supernatural stuff happening at the
Right.
same time.
Well,
So
it's superhero themed as well. So I mean that
yes,
also adds to it. It's there's so many amazing books out there are basically thematically taken from other thematic stories as well. If we had $1 for every Romeo and Juliet story that somebody else did, we'd be millionaires, right? So I don't think that that's a big deal because it's still your story. It's still unique because of what's inside it and I'm sure how you tell it. Because if your other stories are any indication, it's going to be a little bit different than what normal people would expect from, say, another author.
yeah, I think that's very true. Yes, originality is is not the most important thing you need to strive for. I mean, heaven knows I steal all my plots from different places. Anyway, yes, yeah. So it's a plot that lets us go in depth as to like who a superhero is, how superpowers can like sort of warp your life and your sense of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's a book about a reunion because I love reunion stories. I love the Big Chill, the Royal Tenenbaums. I love people with a lot of old business coming back in contact with each other again.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a story where, like Invincible, where who the characters are and what their powers are really sort of intermingled and and fused with one another. Um, I'm really excited about the book. I'm very, very excited about it.
Yeah.
I will say about it, it is only coming out in the UK right now. We do not have the US deal in place yet.
Okay.
So if you want the book, you you have to order it from the UK, and we can put up a link. Which it's a pain in the neck, but also it helps me if you do that because then it gets me a better deal in the US,
Yeah.
which is actually something I really need. So
Awesome. When we're done, you can send it to me and I
really,
can put it in the show notes and then they can get it.
yes.
All the downloads and stuff can get that link directly.
Mhm.
So, do you have prospects of this being put into audiobook format?
Oh yeah. Yes, I got it to cast the actor for it, and it's already being recorded, and it's gonna be great.
Excellent. I'm assuming Audible. Most of Random House's stuff ends up on Audible.
I assume so, except it's a UK studio, so it might come out differently. But you know what? You can buy it. You can order it on the Penguin Random House page.
There you go.
It's at the link.
Awesome. That's amazing. Is it tied in to the Soon I Will Be Invincible like universe? Is it set in the same universe or is it separate and it's just because they're both superheroes they're thematically similar?
Legally, I cannot say
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
but um, but in all other senses, yes, yes, it is.
Okay.
Uh,
Awesome.
I had to file some serial numbers off. But yeah, it's the same world.
Okay. Great. That's exciting. That's exciting for people who are fans of the previous book as well. So it'll be great to see. I was under the impression that you also had another book after that in the works. Is that true? And can you talk about it?
A little bit. Yeah, I have a graphic novel that is coming out from First Second Books. I'm actually not even sure if it's okay for me to say that, but I'm saying it. It's a ton of fun. You know what? My brother wrote The Magicians, right? About a book about a school for witches and wizards. And I was like, are you really doing that, Lev? Like, have you no shame? Uh, is what I said, or words to that effect. Anyway, so I pitched a graphic novel, which was what if Wizard School sucks? And it's about these two kids in the Midwest of the United States, and they go to Wizard School in like Indiana, and they're like, this sucks. So they run away. They run away, and one of their teachers runs away with them. And the book is called We Hate Wizard School. And it's about what if Wizard School sucked and you ran away and you know what? You were in 1980s, the Midwest, and you discovered punk rock and you had cool adventures.
Yeah.
And that's it's being illustrated right now. I'm hoping to get it out at the end of next year. And you know what? It's really fun. It's really different from anything I've ever done. It's an adventure with a bunch of teenagers, and yeah, you know what? It's gonna be really good.
That's excellent. I'm looking forward to that too. That's gonna be cool. And it's a fun concept too, because it's, everybody's like, I want to get there. Nobody thinks once you get there, you want to get out. Nobody ever thinks you want to be done with this place. Run away.
Yeah, exactly. And well, that's what I do all the time, right? I retell things, genre stories, but I find a weird skewed way to come at them. And This is another example of that.
Awesome. You're going to be at the Yeah You Right, hashtag Yeah You Right event in Brooklyn on June 6th, right?
Yeah, if you're in New York City, come to the reading. It's in it's the Sunday Bar in Brooklyn, but it's not like deep Brooklyn. It's like nearby Brooklyn. And they have a great lineup of authors. They're going to have a custom cocktail based on each book that is being read from. Like, I've been to a bunch of these. They're always a great time.
That's great. So it's just people get together is it just like an open forum thing, or are there like specified events and like over here is this at this time and over here is that at this time?
Well, there's a specified lineup, right? There's 4 or 5 people, and we're each going to read and talk, and then there's little open mic sections in between the readers.
Okay.
So it's like a fun communal event.
Okay.
Like I said, I go every time they offered it, and finally I'm going to be in it.
That's great. That's awesome. You just get to mingle with the people, or are you like behind a table and
Oh no, it's a bar. We're in a bar.
Okay.
We're all drinking our signature drinks and hanging out. It's pretty great.
Do you get to choose what is in your signature drink? Do you have any say in it, or is it like, this is your drink? It's like, oh well, I hate tequila or whatever it might be.
No, they have like actual people who are good at cocktails make these things up. They said that, they asked me if I had any guidelines, and I said, I'm not an absinthe drinker, so no absinthe, but otherwise go to town. I'm gonna it's gonna be interesting. I don't know what a fight me is gonna taste like, but I'm gonna have several.
Gosh, now I gotta write a novel and get in there so they can make a drink for me.
You know what? It's really cool.
Awesome. Do you have any other events that you're planning on attending? Any conventions or other podcasts or anything like that you think are coming up?
Not yet, but I'm still lining things up. And it's all going to be on my social media. I'm quite certain I will be popping up different places this summer. Okay. So if you just follow me on Instagram, that's the best way to find out.
Sounds good. And they can find you at austingrossman.com. They can find you on Instagram at Austin_Grossman. Also on Threads, Austin_Grossman, or on Blue Sky at Grossman.bsk. All the string of stuff for Blue Sky that they have on there.
Yeah.
Hopefully they get that fixed where you can just add Grossman on there and we'll be good. So guys, go ahead and give him a follow at all of those locations, and keep an eye out for the graphic novel. Keep an eye out for the book. We will make sure that in the show notes that we have a link for where you can get the book through the UK as well. So you can make sure to stay on top of that and get that right away. So we will be doing some live stream Q&A in just a minute. So if you guys have questions for Austin, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we will get to them right away after we cover our upcoming guests. Coming up, we're going to be having Django Wexler. He's a fantasy and sci-fi author whose works include the Shadow Campaign series, The Forbidden Library, books for Magic the Gathering, if you ever played Magic the Gathering, and so many more. He's going to be joining us to talk about his life, those books, D&D, and the new book, the D&D Spelljammer novel he's got coming out. That's going to be on June 3rd, and that podcast will be available June 4th. So go ahead, please rate, review, click all those buttons, follow, subscribe, wherever you're listening to us, watching us. Please, please, please follow all of our social medias. We appreciate that. And share us with your friends, because that really means a lot to us, and it means a lot to our guests. So, for Austin Grossman, I am Nick, and I want to say thank you for listening to Epic Realms.